Before we start today's video,
sorry the audio doesn't match here. At the time of editing this, the channel is now over 300 subscribers, so thank you.
And an even bigger thank you for all of the support and your continued support on this channel. I tried to reply to as many comments as I could on the last video, but there were so many of them, so I'm sorry if I missed you. But as I said, I literally can't thank you guys enough for the support you've shown, and it's a bit crazy to me because I didn't think this channel would do well, let alone this quickly. But yeah, thank you. We are staying in the UK today with the serial killer Levi Bellfield, and we're going to look into the web of manipulation and power that he maintained even after he was arrested. As always, I mean no disrespect to anyone named in this video or any of the families, and this is all public information found on the internet that I have compiled into one video.
Who is Levi Bellfield?
On May 17th, 1968, Levi Bellfield was born at West Middlesex Hospital in London to a couple of Romani descent, Jean and Joseph Bellfield. He grew up on a southwest London council estate, and his father died when he was 10 from leukemia, so his mother ended up bringing him and his siblings up alone as a single parent. Trouble started to rise in 1981 when Levi got his first conviction for burglary. It also was bad in 1990 when he got arrested for assaulting a police officer. In between those two offences, he filled his criminal record up with offences for driving and theft.
Who is Amanda Jane Millie Dowler?
Amanda Jane Millie Dowler was a 13-year-old schoolgirl who went missing June 23rd, 2001. She was last seen walking along Station Avenue in Walton-on-Thames in Surrey when she was walking home from school by herself. Following an intense and thorough search, her remains were found on the 18th of September in Yateley Heath Woods in Hampshire. This then put the case from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry.
Anna Marie-Rennie.
October 2001, then 17-year-old student Anna Marie-Rennie was sat alone at a bus stop after having a late-night argument with her boyfriend. She was sat there for probably around 5 minutes before she started making her way along the road. She made her way down the road before turning back on herself and saw that there was a man following her. She felt really uneasy about him, so she decided to cross the road. And for the next 10 minutes, she was distracted by a driver in a passerby car. They sat, had a conversation. He offered to drive her home. She politely declined and decided to start walking back along down the road. This is when the man that was following her came up behind her and grabbed her. She fell to the ground, screaming and kicking in an attempt to make it as difficult as possible. He put his hand over her mouth and picked her up. And as he was pulling her towards a car that was parked in a nearby lay-by with the back passenger door open, she was kicking and screaming for all of her might to try and get away. And then suddenly, just as they were going to come up into the car, he decided to just let her go, and she ran away through a nearby park.
Marsha Mcdonnall.
February 2003, 19-year-old Marsha Mcdonnall was found severely beaten only yards away from her home in Hampshire. She had just gotten off of the bus after going to the cinema with her friends. She died 2 days later in hospital, and her post-mortem discovered that she had several head injuries and a bleed on the brain.
Irma Dragoshi.
Irma Dragoshi was sat alone at the bus stop waiting, but she was on the phone to her husband. Her husband describes hearing his wife scream and then the phone going dead. She told the police that someone had come up behind her, tried to snatch her phone, and then hit her in the back of the head. She was suffering nausea and amnesia from this event. She also had a massive lump on the back of her head and 2 black eyes.
Kate Sheedy.
On May 28, 2004, 18-year-old Kate Sheedy had just been out with her friends celebrating the end of her exams at a karaoke bar. She had just gotten off of the bus and was taking the short walk home. As she was walking down the road, she saw a white people carrier on the same side of the road as her, with the lights on, parked up, with the engine still running. It made her feel really uneasy, and she didn't want to walk past it, so she decided to cross the road. But as she stepped out onto the road, the vehicle sped up and hit her face on. After the initial impact, the driver decided to drive over her and then reverse and make sure to drive back over her again. He then sped off into the night and was never seen again. Once the vehicle had gone, she decided to try and stand up, not realising the extensive injuries that she had just suffered. She tried to call her mum and tell her that she was dying, and her mum and her dad ran out of the house, only yards away to find that her daughter is on the floor dying after someone had just tried to run her over, and all of her stuff is out strewn across the road. Crazy. Her lower back had been ripped open, her liver was split in 2, she had multiple broken ribs and a broken collarbone. Miraculously, she managed to keep breathing and survived, even though one of her lungs had collapsed and the other had been punctured. She spent a month in hospital before she was discharged and allowed to continue treatment at home.
Amelie Delagrange.
August 19th, 2004. 22-year-old French student Amelie Delagrange was found in Twickenham Green with severe head injuries. She died later at the hospital that night. Police quickly linked this murder to 19-year-old Marsha Mcdonnall, who died from very similar injuries the year previously.
How did Levi Bellfield get caught?
After connecting the murders, police appealed for information on a white van that was seen circling the area that Emily's body was found on CCTV. They had over 26,000 people to eliminate from their suspect list, so they cross-referenced it with another list of women who had come in stating that their partner or ex-partner might have had something to do with the murders. They came across Jo Collins, who said that her partner at the time, Levi Bellfield, had come to her the night that Amelie Delagrange had been murdered, stating that he had done something unforgivable and he was in a shaky and vulnerable state. He was a known hater of blonde women and he fit the police profile. They connected Levi Bellfield to Marsha Mcdonnell's murder because they saw on the CCTV of her getting off of the bus that there was a Vauxhall Corsa nearby, and this Vauxhall Corsa was registered only a couple of months previously to have been bought by Levi Bellfield for £6,000. Only a couple of days after the murder of Marsha Mcdonnell, he sold that car for £1,500 in an attempt to get rid of any evidence. They also connected him to Kate Sheedy, as his old car matched the description down to a T. They put Levi Bellfield under police surveillance and they found that he was patrolling bus stops talking to young women who were by themselves. They arrested him 3 months after Amelie Delagrange's murder, not only for hers, but for Marsha Mcdonnell's too. However, he was not charged with it until 2 years later in 2006.
The first trial.
Levi Bellfield began his trial Friday, October 12th, 2007. He was being convicted of the murder of Amelie Delagrange and Marsha Mcdonnell, the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy and Irma Dragoshi, and the attempted kidnap of Marie-Rennie. He denied all counts. During his trial, a long-time associate of Levi Bellfield, Sunil Guru, was questioned as a witness. He stated that he was actually in the car with Levi when they came up on Irma Dragoshi at the bus stop. He said that Levi looked at him and said, "Watch this," before getting out of the car and attacking her. Levi denied this completely and said that it was actually Sunil who had gotten out of the car and attacked her instead. It was revealed during his trial that only 6 days after Amelie Delagrange's murder that he attempted suicide by overdosing on antidepressants. He was only found by his friend who came over to see him, and he was in his bedroom crying, very drowsy after taking an overdose, and he was saying, "You don't know what I've done." He was admitted to a mental facility that night, and he was telling staff that he felt really low and suicidal. However, he discharged himself the next day. All throughout the trial, Levi denied being present at any of the attacks, even though there were cars registered to him near the scene. He stated that that was pure coincidence because his job as a wheel camper gives him access to a variety of cars that would be registered in his name. He says that he also has a large team that has access to all of these cars as well. And they just happened to be in the area, but it could have been different people from his team. He appealed to the jury and stated that he was a victim of mistaken identity. Despite all of his efforts to try and warp the story of what had actually happened to those females, he was found guilty of the murder of Amelie Delagrange, Marsha Mcdonnall, and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy on the 25th of February 2008. The jury did not come to a verdict on the attempted murder of Irma Dragoshi or the attempted kidnap of Anna Marie-Rennie. And just to prove himself as a coward, he decided not to turn up for his sentencing, and he was given a whole life order.
The second trial.
On the 10th of May 2011, Levi Bellfield went under trial again, this time for the murder of Millie Dowler and the attempted abduction of Rachel Cowles. The day before Millie Dowler went missing, 11-year-old Rachel Cowles was approached by Levi in a red car. He stated to her that he was his new neighbour and that she should get in his car and he'll drive her home. She didn't recognise the vehicle and had never seen it in her street before, so she politely declined. And luckily at that moment, a police car also drove by, so Levi left. When Rachel told her mother what had happened when she got home, she immediately phoned the police, but Rachel was too shaken up to actually give a description of the man that had tried to coerce her to get into his car. And no one took an official statement from them or tried to connect it to Millie Dowler until 3 years later. During trial, it emerges that Levi Bellfield's family were actually not at home the day that Millie Dowler went missing. His ex-partner, Emma Mills, took to the stand as a witness and stated that she remembers not being able to get hold of him that day, which is really unusual. The day after Millie Dowler's disappearance, he decides to move his family out of the Collingwood address, which he supposedly stayed in that night, and up and moved them to West Drayton. The red Daewoo Nexia that is known to be Levi Bellfield's, as it's connected to Rachel Cowles and her attempted abduction, it was seen leaving the area that Millie Dowler was last seen only 22 minutes later. In some kind of power move, during his second trial, he stated he would not be giving evidence in his defence. Instead, his defence lawyers took this as an opportunity to put Millie Dowler's parents on trial and stated that Bob Dowler, her dad, was actually a suspect at one point in the murder case, and that she had written this letter when she was alive stating that she was unhappy and wanted to run away, which is awful. Like, you've just lost your 13-year-old daughter and the person who's supposedly done it is putting you on trial instead.
The confessions.
Luckily though, on the 23rd of June 2011, he was found guilty on both counts and was given another whole life term order. In 2016, Levi Bellfield actually admitted and finally confessed to what he had done to Millie Dowler. I'm going to warn anyone from this point, skip the next minute if you don't want to hear what he said he did. He explained that he abducted her in his car and took her to his flat close to the Walton railway station where he assaulted her. He then drove her to the driveway of his own mother's house and raped her in broad daylight over the boot of his car. He continued with the cycle of assaulting her until the next day when he strangled her and dumped her body in the woods. Since Levi Bellfield's imprisonment, police have looked into other cases that are unsolved murders and assaults they believe that he could be connected to. A senior social worker found that he actually had connections to a grooming group, I suppose you could call it. It was a group of 6 men, all known to have had convictions for grooming, sexual assault, child offences, murder. Some of them were named to be Victor Kelly, a man who was convicted of giving a 14-year-old girl drugs in an attempt to manipulate her to have sex with him. The other one is Suraj Garu, a 25-year-old man who was convicted of luring a 14-year-old girl out of her children's home and having sex with her. I think you might recognise the name Garu, and if you do, that's because Suraj Garu's brother, Sunil Garu, was actually a witness in Levi Bellfield's first murder trial, and he was the one that stated that he was in the car when Levi had attempted to kill Irma Dragoshi. He was convicted himself of perverting the course of justice after he lied to try and protect his brother on these child sex offences. After Levi's conviction in 2008, police decided to look into any unsolved cases that they have and he could be linked to. They came across 51-year-old Judith Gold, who had died several yards away from her home when she was attacked, and in a very similar way to Marsha Mcdonnall and Amelie Delagrange. In fact, police believe that Levi Bellfield is responsible for another 20 unsolved attacks on women between the times of 1990 and 2004. Police were informed in early 2015 that Levi Bellfield wanted to make some more confessions to unsolved murder and rape cases that he had allegedly been involved in. The Met Police decided to investigate with several streams of revenue here. They actually split it up into several investigations under 10 different policing teams. They released a statement stating, on November 9th, 2016, all lines of inquiry have been exhausted and the decision has been taken to close the investigations as there is no evidence to link the individual to any case for which he has not already been convicted. Police believe that he only gave those confessions so he could hurt the victims' families and have another avenue, I guess, of power. Whilst in prison, Levi Bellfield had supposedly written a letter to another inmate's defence attorneys stating that he was actually the one responsible for the murders that their client is locked up for.
The Russell murders.
In July 1996, Dr. Lynn Russell, who was 45, was walking home with her 2 daughters, 9-year-old Josie and 6-year-old Megan, and the family dog from a swimming gala that they had both been at. It had been around 20 past 4 in the afternoon and they were walking down a country road. One car passed by them. Josie even said that she remembered waving at the driver as the car disappeared. They went further along down that road and the car was parked up, the same car that Josie had just waved at. The driver had gotten out of the vehicle with a hammer and came at Lynn demanding all of her money. She stated that she'd left her money and purse at home, she's fine to bring him back home with her and she'll give him the money there. Just don't do anything to her or her children. She did everything she could to get out of that situation. And clearly he did not oblige with her. Instead, he took the three and the dog to a small gathering of trees just off of the road. He decided to tie the three of them up with blue strips from Josie's swimming towel and a pair of bootlaces and a pair of tights. He tied them up and he killed the family dog in front of them. After he did that, he decided to hit Lynn 15 times over the head. She died very quickly. He then decided to hit Josie over the head until he saw brains. And then he did the same with 6-year-old Megan. He then drove away in the same car, the same way that he was driving before. Half an hour later, half a mile away from the murder scene, a man was spotted acting very frustrated and agitated. That same man disappeared only 5 minutes later, and there was a drawstring bag full of bloody blue strips of a towel. Unfortunately, Megan died along with her mother, but miraculously, Josie actually survived the attack. In July 1997, 37-year-old Michael Stone was actually arrested for the 2 murders and the attempted murder of 9-year-old Josie. He was arrested after an episode of Crime Watch, which led to a couple of tip-offs about Michael Stone. A psychiatrist called in to report his suspicions on Michael Stone, along with 2 nursing staff that stated that they worked with him only days before the murders actually had happened. Apparently, a few days before the murders had happened, he was threatening to kill people and their entire family, and apparently he threatened his probation officer with a hammer. He was found to have no alibi for that day because he states that he was a heavy drug addict and he was on drugs at the time, and it was over a year since they'd arrested him. So he couldn't remember what he was doing that day, especially if he was high on drugs. During his trial, he maintained his innocence and stated that he could not remember where he was. It is proven that at 12:21 p.m. that day, he was at a cash converter's 40 miles away as he had a receipt for it. Michael Stone was adamant that he had never even heard of the area Chillenden which the murders had taken place. But all of his friends actually testified that he knew the area like the back of his hand, and it actually came up that he spent some time in a children's home in Chillenden when he was young, so he does have knowledge of the area. The prosecution could not establish any motive for him being in that area at that time, other than the fact that he was a drug addict and he needed to finance his habit somehow, and they knew that he burgled houses. So they stated that he drove 40 miles away to Chillenden, away from his hometown, to burgle houses and steal things, and ended up killing the Russell family. His friends testified that he was known to carry a hammer in his car due to his heroin addiction. A key witness in the Russell murders was a woman who was driving on the adjacent road at the time of the killings. She said she had seen a man emerge quickly from the junction by the murder site in a beige car. She could tell he was angry and he kept looking back at her in his wind mirrors. This was the same woman who helped police with a sketch of the suspect during the investigation. Another witness recounted driving past a man acting strangely close by. He wasn't in a vehicle, but he was talking back and forth in frustration with a claw hammer in his hand. A third witness stated he saw a beige Ford Escort parked by some bushes nearby, and when he walked his dog in the same area half an hour later, he found the string bag full of bloody towel strips. Michael Stone was never registered driving a beige Ford Escort and was registered as having a white Toyota Tercel at the time of the crime.
Although friends of Michael told police he did used to drive a beige car matching the description that was given by witnesses, police never connected him to a vehicle of this type. However, Levi Bellfield drove a beige 1987 Ford Sapphire in the summer of '96, which belonged to his partner, Joe Collins. This make and model could easily be mistaken for a Ford Escort.
Strangely, the only witness known to have definitely seen the attacker, Jody Russell, maintained that he drove a red car, and Stone admitted to owning a red car. At the scene, a bloody fingerprint was found on the top of Josie's lunchbox and hairs that did not belong to anyone at the scene. Also, a blood-stained black bootlace was found at the scene and was known to be used in the attacks to tie at least one of the victims up. It is known that Michael Stone uses bootlaces, or at least shoelaces, as a tourniquet for when he is injecting drugs. So they said that he used what he had on hand, which was his tourniquet lace. However, that doesn't make sense because the items at the scene were found to have no link to Stone. The bloody fingerprint had no link to Stone. The hairs, no link. They only linked him to this scene, stating that he had to have been there because it was a lace that was used, even though it doesn't make sense how they could put that together. A hammer was also found nearby, but they could not determine that that hammer was the murder weapon. The day after the attack, Michael Stone, apparently, according to his friends, were acting very skittish. He refused to go into his friends' houses that he usually had no problem with, and his friends said that they saw a blood-stained toolbox and a blue sweatshirt in his car, and apparently Michael Stone burnt everything that was blood-stained. Michael Stone's first trial seems a bit shifty to me. He pleaded not guilty in 1999 and he was convicted because another inmate stated that he'd confessed to him. Michael Stone had apparently confessed to another inmate called Damien Daly through the heat pipes in the back of their cells. Apparently they used to have conversations with each other through these pipes, and that Michael had confessed to him one night that he did actually do the murders and he remembers everything.
Michael Stone was convicted when 3 inmates stated in court that he had confessed to them in one way or another that he had murdered the Russell family. He was sentenced to 3 whole life term orders on no physical evidence and the words of other inmates. Michael Stone was awarded a retrial by the Court of Appeal in 2001 when 2 out of the 3 inmates who gave evidence as witnesses were found to be lying. He was convicted again of Damien Daly's statement alone. To give some sincerity to his claims, the jury visited the cells that the 2 men had the supposed conversation through the pipes to investigate whether you could actually speak to each other through these said pipes. After it was found that it was plausible that the conversation could have happened, Michael Stone was reconvicted of the murders. Since Stone's incarceration, Damien Daly has admitted he is a habitual liar, but states he never lied during the trial. There has since been rumours that Damien Daly stood as a witness in this trial and gave false evidence so the police would look the other way with his drug dealing behind bars, but this cannot be confirmed.
In 2004, Michael Stone was granted leave for appeal again after his lawyers stated that it's unfair the way he was trialed and that Damien Daly's testimony is unreliable. However, the judge stated that Michael Stone will spend a minimum of 25 years in prison before being considered for the possibility of parole, because there was no evidence to suggest that Damien Daly was lying.
As of February 2022, Michael Stone's lawyers have claimed they received a 4-page detailed letter from Levi Bellfield with information that only the killer would know. Levi Bellfield denies ever sending the letter or confessing to these murders. What is Levi Bellfield doing now?
Levi Bellfield was confirmed to have converted to Islam while behind bars and demands to be known as Yusuf Rahim since finding his religion in 2016. He is currently serving his sentence in HMP Franklin and he has proposed to his girlfriend he met whilst in jail in May 2022. However, Dominic Raab has stated that granting his request of marriage is inconceivable as there are large safety concerns for his partner. The prison's minister, Victoria Atkins, said, "I just want to reassure people I understand an application has been made that has not been decided yet, and he has most certainly not been married yet. But if I may, he's currently got the right under Article 12 of the Human Rights Act to get married, or they have the right to have the application to be considered by prison governors. It's absolutely appalling. I've ordered an immediate review into this. I very much welcome the debate we're about to have about the Bill of Rights and looking at human rights for the United Kingdom for the 21st century. Believe me, I will be raising this." What do you think of letting a serial killer and a clearly spiteful man like Levi Bellfield marry in prison? Do you think it's right? Do you believe that as a human he has the right to be married? And do you believe that they have the right to deny him this? Do you think this is another power play by him? Don't forget to subscribe so you get notified about my next case. And as I said before, thank you so much for the continued support on this channel. And as always, if you want to comment about any case you want me to look into, let me know and it could be my next one. Also, don't forget to follow the link in the description if you want to read about this case or any others I have looked into in the past, and check out my blog.